Hello, everybody. It is 10:01 p.m. Central Time on January 2nd, 2017. Welcome into the Earthquake 3D live stream, guys. Good to see you. I'm here on the camera in case you missed it. Welcome in, and of course, we daily recap events around here that strike around the planet, in case you didn't know. And we also issue semi-daily earthquake forecast for new areas to watch. And let's just get right into it. First of all, before I do that, in chat, we've got a whole grip of people now over in Twitch, as well as everybody on YouTube. So everybody over on Twitch who's new, welcome in. And we do this so that we can get the word out on earthquake awareness and so that we can get the warnings out to the people around the planet. And this is tying right into the first earthquake I'm going to report to you that struck today, which is an extremely deep 6.3 earthquake. Now you see the deep earthquake is right next to our letter D. And if you're a new viewer, that stands for deep earthquake. And we have this on the map to indicate this is a spot where deep earthquakes normally strike. One of these locations, and there's another one up here near Japan we'll talk about in a second, that was also struck by a deep earthquake. But this earthquake in particular, this 6.3, has the ability to generate up to a 7.3 to 8.3. So a 7.3 to 8.3 is potential off this deep earthquake, but the question is, where is the large earthquake going to strike in relation to this deep earthquake here? Well, if it was the only earthquake, we would be able to determine our location based solely upon it, and it would put a large earthquake in the vicinity around the deep earthquake up to a few thousand kilometers away. That encompasses New Zealand and over to the west into Papua New Guinea. However, there is another set of deep earthquakes that happened, one up here near Japan. Now you may remember last night we issued a warning for this particular spot. Let me zoom in on it so you can see it. This spot right here in the Tokyo harbor, we issued a warning for this location. Now a deep earthquake has struck down below the spot. Well, it's 4.5. Well, just like the other earthquake can cause 1 to 2 magnitudes larger, this earthquake up in Japan can cause 1 to 2 magnitudes larger. Now we have to go back almost 2 days to when I issued the warning for here in the Philippines to be on watch for a shallow 7.9. Now the reason we were looking for a shallow 7.9 is because the whole West Pacific had already moved from up in Japan all the way down to New Zealand. But guys, today, after these two deep earthquakes up near Japan and down near Fiji, another deep earthquake struck over here where our other letter D is, and it's 4.1. Now all these deep earthquakes are raised high off the globe. Finishing it out down here to the south, we saw a moderately deep earthquake, not as deep as all the others, in the more like 200 kilometer depth. Still deep enough to be below the plate, but not extremely deep, not at that 500 or 600 kilometer depth that we see our big one here. So summed all up, from the big one over here, all the way across the planet, over to the Mideast with our other deep earthquake, an area 8,500 miles across has moved down below the plates. And that's plates plural because it's multiple plates that exist here. Asia, West Pacific, going over to north of Australia. So what does it mean? It means an area 8,500 miles across, or roughly 10,000 kilometers, maybe even more, has moved on a level at least 5.0, 4 to 5.0, and going up to 6 over here to the east. Now I want you to imagine what kind of pressure that would take to move half the planet in 1 day's time. And then I want you to imagine the center point in between these deep earthquakes. So it's almost making like a diamond shape. Do you see that? Far to the west, we have our deep 4.1 raised high off the globe. Far to the east, we have our deep 6.3 raised high off the globe. And then on both sides, Japan and Indonesia right in the middle, we have deep earthquakes on both sides. Now we already issued a warning for a 7.9 in this central location near Philippines. With the new deep 6.3, let me take you back over the past couple months. Every time we've seen a new deep 6.3 strike, it's usually followed within the week, 7 days or less, with a 7.9. We've seen it happen 3 times now. Okay, so it's happened 3 times this year. There's been a deep earthquake like a 6.3, right on at 6.3. One of them was a 6.4. It was over here a week before Christmas. A deep 6.4 struck over here, and it was followed by a 7.9 7 days later in Chile on Christmas Day. It happened twice before over here in the West Pacific this year. So here's another one. Is it going to happen again? If it does, it's going to split out on both sides of the 6.3, travel down to New Zealand, and out to the west. Now, I would like to remind everybody that last night we issued the warning for the area where the red arrow is here at New Zealand. Lo and behold, the arrow was hit, and it was hit by a 5.1, just like the 5.1 that struck yesterday over to the west. You see these? Let's get the other earthquakes off there. Okay, so our deep earthquake is flanked on both sides by 5.1s. And the reason that occurred is because of the 4.3. I know you guys have to be paying attention here. This is because of the 4.3 that struck a few days ago. So these deep earthquakes cause shallower, larger movement. If you're down in New Zealand, you need to be aware that there is potential for the North Island, just north of the North Island, to be struck by up to a 7.3. But we're more looking, and this is a double warning, so north of the island has the potential to go up by 1 magnitude from this deep 6.3. Secondly, the plate boundary in between the North Island and the South Island needs to watch for at least 6.0 activity. And we hope it would be less. We hope it would be a swarm of 5s. But most likely, the plate boundary will be struck. Plate boundary right where you were struck before. So south of Wellington, basically back in the swarm location. And it could go up to 6. But I'm leaning towards more heavy movement to the north of New Zealand, backed by our red arrow again. Okay? So get the warning out to the people in New Zealand. You have to watch for a double whammy. From north of the North Island is where a larger earthquake could strike. And when I say north of the North Island, we go to our red arrow. It's pretty much the halfway point. The halfway point between what? Well, let's go turn on the GeoNet, which is the New Zealand last 30 earthquakes. And you're going to see the whole island is already lit up pretty much from the plate boundary up to the north. We have another new deep earthquake marked out right at our catcher's mitt position. I call this the catcher's mitt position because it looks like a catcher's mitt, but it also receives a lot of the pressure coming in from the north. I can tell you this, every single time we see deep earthquakes to your north, it results in larger, shallower earthquakes to the south, going right down into New Zealand proper. So you need to be on watch from the red arrow to your plate boundary that fractured last month with the big one. And this spot always tends to be hit now that it's ruptured. It's the first spot to go before you see big movement up to the north. So the 6 should come first, or near 6, and it should be striking at our plate boundary. Okay? That would be what I'd be looking for in New Zealand itself. Now, if I'm 1 magnitude off on this, if I'm 1 magnitude under, that means a bigger earthquake's going to hit. And we don't want that. If I'm 1 magnitude over, then it'll only be in the 4 to 5 range. Won't be that big of a deal. So it's make it or break it time for New Zealand right now, guys. And I'm not exaggerating. Whenever we see these deep earthquakes, you have to watch for larger movement, man. I'm not exaggerating. So please just dust off your plans and be ready, be on watch. If you know, I saw somebody say, should we contact the fire departments down in New Zealand? Let them know. Yes. Yes, you should. You should let them know that there's been a large, deep earthquake to their north, and usually that puts pressure down on New Zealand. It would be prudent to just be prepared. You don't have to be sleeping outside in a hammock, but you do have to be on watch that it could go down and it could be larger than the 6.3 that's to your north. But most likely, most of the pressure is going to go to the west. That's which way most of our arrows point. You can see on the map here, most of our arrows go to the west by northwest. And the pressure escapes out of the Pacific and goes over towards Europe. It also goes up and around clockwise towards the coast of the United States. And we'll get into the U.S. next, but first things first, one other set of earthquakes struck that I got to tell you about. You remember how we warned right here at our red arrow last night and told everybody to watch for a mid-range 5 to 6.0 earthquake? Mid-range 5 struck. Now they downgrade down to, first actually was at a 5, then they put it up to 5.6, then they immediately took it down to 5.3. Well, we were looking for a mid-range 5 to 6.0 earthquake. And here it is, and it struck right at the red arrow. Why did it strike at the red arrow? Well, it's the spot, the fulcrum point, that we talked about between Cinnabung and these earthquakes over to the east. You remember last night's update. Additionally, we warned the area up near Taiwan, but we're looking for this large movement to strike throughout the Philippines. And if it's going to be a large earthquake, if it's going to be in that 7.9 range, we need to warn all of Philippines, Western Papua New Guinea, and Taiwan. But to be prudent, or to be safe, down here at the center point, that's the primary zone we're going to be watching for. So it may encompass all of Philippines that we're going to have to watch for the next 2 more days. Now there's been this new round of deep earthquakes. That's basically just adding more punch to the overall jackhammering action that we're talking about with this deep earthquake activity, okay? Now over to Europe, what struck today? Well, guys, out here at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, we saw activity strike, and we saw activity strike up in Poland, right along our plate boundary, right at our red arrow progression line. Now the reason earthquake struck there is, over the past couple days, take a look down to the east. Okay, so all that activity I talked about yesterday, plus a new earthquake up here at the crescent-shaped lake that we were talking about when I got shut off last night. Well, that pressure goes right over to the west, and it hit in Poland. So our 4.5, and we're definitely talking about the 4.5, pressing over to the west, exciting things to the north. But down to the south, last night, also, I would like to point out, the 4.0 earthquake we were looking for to strike in Italy, it hit. And it hit pretty much right on spot. Now, the magnitude they went with was a half magnitude less than what was originally reported. So it was a 4.6, 4.5 to 4.6. And you may remember we issued the warning for a 4.7. So whether or not they could do the downgrade, Central Italy was hit yesterday. That relieved the pressure. But there's new pressure coming in. And we have another day to go. So by tomorrow night, that would be the 3rd going into the 4th, we should be seeing at least a 5.0 striking here near Crete, in between Crete and Cyprus yet once again. That'll reprime things up for Italy. Now, why are we looking for a 5 in South Europe? Well, guys, we have our deep earthquake right here, and this doesn't even count what the Russians are showing. Let's go check the Russian agency really quick. Okay, so again, this feed is thanks to Squeaks and MC Player, 2 of our dedicated professionals here. And take a look at it, guys. When you see what the Russians reported over the last day and a half, you're going to notice something here. Or if you don't notice it, let me point it out to you. There's a progression of 4s going across Siberia, China, Mideast, going into South Europe over the past 2 days. Now, not all these earthquakes were reported by the USGS. Russians are reporting a few of these quakes. So we have to go to them to get the information because USGS is not reporting everything. But if you do see it, you can see the progression that has gone on over the past couple days. It follows our line of progression. Well, this is all going to happen again. With this new round of deep earthquakes happening now, it means over the next several days, things are going to be excited for the whole dang planet. And that's not an exaggeration either. With half the planet moving down below with these deep earthquakes, the other half of the planet is going to compensate. And this leads me into the United States. Guys, take a look at the screen. Now, you may remember there were no earthquakes in Oklahoma for several days' time. This led me to get on when the 2 swarms struck out in California, and we issued a warning for Oklahoma to be on watch for a new swarm topping out near 4.0, right? Well, take a look at it. A new swarm topping out near 4.0 has struck after it was completely silent. And let's go look up one of these earthquakes. For you guys who are new, who've never seen what's here, there's a reason earthquakes are striking here, guys. And if you're into science, I think you're going to be blown away. Now, you may have already heard this term, but when I search the term, or when I search the location, you're going to know what I'm talking about because it's been in the media from time to time. As we zoom in on these locations, you're going to see these yellow place marks. These are place marks for different frack wells that I've marked in the past where they're doing drilling and they're extracting gas and oil from these locations. And every single one of these square pads, and I show them all the time in my updates because there's so many earthquakes that start striking at these spots. The reason these frack wells are hit, there's water under pressure put down into these drill points. And they call it wastewater, but really all it is polluted water from big industry looking to get rid of it. And so they sell it actually. Actually, the oil companies get paid to take it and they pump it down into the ground. It fractures the shale and it releases gas, but then they just leave the water down in the well as wastewater and they cap it off and dispose of it in what's called a disposal well. It's disgusting, I know, but that's the way they get rid of this polluted water that they can't figure out what to do with. Okay? So, as we do this, we zoom in and you can clearly see there's pads all over the place, and this imagery is from 2014. What does it mean? Well, guys, a swarm broke out here because of the swarms over to the west. Pressure transfers to the east across the whole North American plate. Now get this, professionals denied that this was possible. That's why fracking operations are being hit right now. Professionals denied that it was possible for pressure to transfer from the West Coast to the Midwest. You know how I know they denied it? They came to my pages using their real accounts to deny that there was pressure transferring across any region, and especially across the United States. They said I didn't understand geology or seismology, and that it was just a coincidence. Well, here we go. Okay, it's not a coincidence. We can plan on this like clockwork, and that's why we forecast a swarm topping out near 4.0 to be breaking out in Oklahoma within the next 2 days, and here we are on day 2 and it's hit. Now the reason being is when pressure pushes on the plate, it hits these spots. Humans have drilled out thousands of feet. They basically have built hydraulic shock absorbers without the ability to absorb the shock. So pressurized chambers, basically. They've put a bunch of pressurized chambers in the ground. Is anybody shocked that if you introduce pressure on the underside or the side of the chamber and it's made of stone, that it might fracture and break and release those contents under pressure and cause an earthquake? I don't think anybody should be shocked. I think what geologists should be shocked about is that they somehow missed the fact that pressure transfers from the West Coast to the Midwest along the interior edge of the craton. That all being said, we are watching for a new earthquake to strike off the coast of California. And to get a better idea of the location, let me quickly turn on our smaller earthquake feed. This is going to show us the last day of all earthquakes, 0.0 and greater. Now it's going to look like a lot because it is a lot, but take a look at it, guys. Let me turn down the rings. And this is indicative of a coming earthquake off the coast. Now let me tell you why. Your warning signs in California are this. Dormant volcanoes start moving first. Then you start seeing your pumping operations like geothermal, gas, oil start to move. Then you finally start to see fault zone movement. Once the fault zones start moving and the pressure has nowhere to go except for over to the east and release of the fracking operations in the Midwest, pressure immediately backfills. Then it strikes off the coast. It's just quite simply that simple. It backfills, and whatever the size earthquakes we see strike interior to the coast, you can add those together and get a rough estimate about what is going to be striking on or off the coast within just a few days. So if we see a bunch of 2s, stacks of 1s and 2s, we can add that all up and it equals approximately an upper 4. But if we take into account the coming pressure, the pressure that's been coming across the plate from 5.0 activity over to the west and this new deep earthquake, it means over the next couple days, not only is there a threat for a 5.5 to strike, but by the end of this week, we should be actually looking at 6. So it should get hit twice. Once with the earthquake that's already primed to go, any day now, and then over the next 5 days, this new round of deep earthquakes is going to put pressure all the way around the plate and re-excite things up. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. First things first, 5.5 should be striking at our red arrow. After the 5.5 strikes, and that should be within the next 48 hours, over to the east, we will see a re-excitement back in Oklahoma again. I know. So it's going to just keep on going. And with this new round of deep earthquakes, it's going to get larger, guys. West Coast, it's going to go up by another half magnitude and take you up into the 6 level by day 5 into 6. And again, today is day 1. This earthquake just struck today. This new deep earthquake. Not just this one. All of them struck today. Okay? Excuse me. So, as we look across the United States, that's your outlook for the next couple days. It's kind of bleak, I know. Central America, South America, this is all going to hinge on what happens over here with our large earthquake. If we see the 7.9 that I'm looking for to strike over here in the West Pacific, it will cause compensation movement, possibly a half magnitude less, but still in the 7.0 range over here. And when I'm saying over here, we're not just pointing to any region. See where our red arrow points in, and see how it points in at the bend of Central America and South America. And if you were to follow this over, it would go right up into Ecuador. Well, we issued a warning 2 days ago. You remember we issued the warning for North Peru, Ecuador, correct? Going up to the Colombia border. And we said, watch for a large upper 5 to strike. And we hoped that it wouldn't cause any deaths like the 5.5 that struck this past week. Well, today, this morning, a 5.9 hit North Peru, guys. 6.0. So, I don't know if there's any fatality reports. I haven't gotten any news out of the area. It's North Peru. It's kind of rural. I would love to have reports if you guys could find them. But the spot we warned, North Peru, hit. So you can cross that one off the list, but there's a new round coming in. And this one's going to be bigger. You see where the deep earthquake is. You see how we have the 2 red arrows coming out across the Pacific. These red arrows signify this is a transfer zone. Again, it takes pressure from the West Pacific all the way over to the East Pacific, and it hits South America like a wall. And the pressure has nowhere to go but around the plate. And it will seek a way up and around through the Caribbean or down and around underneath the plate out to the South Sandwich Islands. And that will all play out this week. So it should strike up here to the north, and then we should see pressure transfer over to the east. So first things first, it could go, like I said, up to 7.0 and or 7.3, I'm sorry. The reason, 1 magnitude to 2 magnitudes larger than this deep earthquake, and it should transfer across the Pacific, not just to the south at New Zealand and not just to the west. It's going to go out in all directions. I want you to imagine the pressure coming up like a giant dome of pressure. You see on the screen here? I want you to imagine this as pressure coming up. And as that pressure spreads outwards and upwards, once it gets to its pinnacle point near the surface, this is all happening down below. You have to imagine this down below the earth. And as the pressure is coming upwards and outwards, it displaces the whole plate in each direction. There's no fracture zone going due north. If there was, we would see a line going up to the north, straight connected like some of these lines, going over to the east and west. So the pressure only has really 3 ways out of here: west, east, and south. And it's going to take all 3 directions. And we should see at least 1 magnitude larger in each direction. Okay? I mean, this is a big deal, guys. The last time we saw deep 6.3s like this, I got on and made the biggest deal about it. I was trying to drive home the point to everybody, and then it just got filed away. Only a few hundred people saved it or shared it, and then the 2 biggest earthquakes of the year hit. This was just 2 weeks ago, guys. Okay? It's going to happen again. And I hope I'm wrong. Dang it, I hope I'm back here in 5 days, and I'm saying, look, okay, well, there's not much going on, and by 7 days that we're canceling the warning. I hope that's what it is. But the last 3 times the deep earthquakes have hit like this, the largest earthquakes of the year followed them up. And now here we are in 2017. If we're going to carry on, it's going to be larger. As we go over towards Japan, I told you guys, we are watching to the south. So we're watching near Philippines, and we're watching for the next couple days. as we go further to the west, or south, south and west, you can see there's another silent zone over the last, well, this is the last day. Let's go ahead and look at the last 2 days just to be safe. Here we go. Here's our combined feed with the USGS. Okay, and over the last 2 days, well, there's not much activity down here in eastern Papua New Guinea, which means eastern Papua New Guinea, where our red arrow is, needs to be put on immediate watch for potential of a large release as well. However, it would only be a combination between the 6.3 to the east and our, let's see, what is our other 4 to the west? 4.6 to the west. So we have a 6.3 to the east, 4.6 to the west, and we have to look 1 magnitude larger. Unfortunately, this means it could be going up to low 7s. 7.3 is potential. It is. I hate to say it. So how many is that now? We're going to look for, that is 3 different areas that have the potential for 7 or greater earthquakes based upon this movement that's going on right now, guys. 3 different locations. It almost sounds preposterous, I know, because we were going from 5s, we'd be going up a whole notch, but this new deep 6.3 means at least one of those is going to be striking in our silent zones to the west. It's pretty obvious where the silent zones are, right? You can see them. Silent zones are the spots that have yet to be hit along the red arrows in the West Pacific. The chances of having another large earthquake, let's say, strike over in Europe off this right now are minimal right now. It's going to strike within this vicinity between these sets of deep earthquakes. And to have this many in one day means we need to watch for the next 5 days to 6 days. So today is the 2nd, going into the 3rd internationally. So if we count out 6 days from the 3rd, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that takes us into the 8th, into the 9th. So it's a long several days where they're going to be on watch. But the last few 6.3s took up to 7 days to transfer up and out and cause the big earthquake. The last one hit on Christmas Day down in Chile. So don't let your guard down at all. Over in Europe, we're watching for this new activity to push into Europe. This should be striking at Crete and between Crete and Cyprus. So between our red arrow and the island to the east right here. And it should be 5 to 5.3. After that, 1 day, it should take for pressure to transfer up into Italy, and it should be in the upper 4 at this point. 4.8, 4.9. Maybe as low as 4.7, but more like upper 4 after the 5 strikes down here in Crete. So, and that should be within, well, let's see, the earthquake that we were expecting yesterday and today hit. Well, let's put it at 72 hours. It's already the 3rd over in Italy. So 3 days, 1, 2, 3. 5th into the 6th should have already hit. Okay? And that's going to again be upper 4. Okay, so that sums it up. I mean, guys, right about now, I would say you should have a plan and be prepared if you live along one of these zones. You know, if you live up in Minnesota or, central Canada, you might be all good. But down here, down along the edge of the Craton, out on the West Coast, you guys hear it all the time, so I'm sure you probably, you already have an earthquake plan, right? But dust it off. Make sure you know what to do. Make sure your bug-out bag is stocked and ready. And it's not that big of a deal. You don't have to have stockpiles of food and water. Just make sure you got an extra set of keys, a way of communication, and make sure your loved ones, your kids, your employees, make sure they know what to do. Okay? And I don't know what your specific lifestyle situation is, so I don't know whether you live in an apartment or a single-story house. Is it rock? Is it made out of stone? I don't know what your living situation is. So you need to look around your house and know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, you can search earthquake preparedness online, anywhere, and you'll find a boatload of resources. I don't have to tell you how to do that. You know how to do it. I just have to poke you to go do it. So go do it. You don't even have to spend any money. Just go read something about what to do, okay? You can say you did something. And when it hits, by the way, when these earthquakes hit in the locations we're talking about, you won't be running around screaming earthquake, you'll be saying, oh, I knew to watch for that. It's like watching for a storm. It's not nearly as scary when you don't, if you don't know a tornado is coming at you and you look out the window and you see the sky is black and there's a tornado coming at you, you're going to panic. But if you know it's coming, well, you'll probably still be scared a little bit, but you'll be doing what you need to do to prepare for a storm. I want you guys to take this like a storm. So don't be scared. Be prepared. And if you're prepared, man, you'll be better off than everybody else on your street or maybe even in your whole town, depending on where you live. Okay? So, how many people are in here right now? Let's see. We've got about 1,163, give or take a few people. Okay, well, that's really cool. If you're new here, please subscribe. And I'm going to save this as a video on my channel. You can either go share last night's video, where I named the areas that got hit today. Okay, I mean, we talked about Oklahoma. We talked about Indonesia. We talked about Japan. We already warned for those areas. So if you want to go check out last night's forecast and compare it to what hit today, you'll see most of the areas I named yesterday were hit today by the expected magnitudes, which means it's reliable. You guys can at least rely on it enough to get the warnings out, and you have a good reason to get it out. Don't feel foolish telling these people to be warned over in the West Pacific. Seriously, you can say, look, there's been multiple deep earthquakes. We've seen it happen in the past where deep earthquakes cause shallow or larger earthquakes. It's happened 3 times in a row in the last 2 months. Just ask the people over in Italy. Hey, look, this is serious now. This isn't some YouTube BS. Seriously, about 2.5 months ago, there was a large, deep earthquake that happened here in the Tyrrhenian Sea, south of Rome. And I'm going to keep telling the story because it matters. A 5.8 deep. It was like 560 kilometers deep. It was raised just as high as this sucker is right here. And it kind of looked like this one. It was a 5.8. This one's a 6.3. And it struck south of Italy. And when I saw it happen, I immediately went into emergency mode. I jumped onto the live stream. Everybody here at the live stream saw it. Jumped on. I said, look, a deep 5.8 at this location, out here in the sea, south of Italy, means there's a potential for a shallower, larger earthquake, 1 to 2 magnitudes larger. And it was a 5.8, right? So if it's going to be larger, it would be a 6.8 to 7.8. So I issued the warning and said, watch out for up to a 7.8. The next day, a 7.4 earthquake hit, and it was the largest earthquake in decades, and people got the warning in Italy. And you know how I know they got the warning? One of them was interviewed on BBC that day, and she mentioned my name twice, that they got the warning the day before, they knew to be prepared, and they slept downstairs ready to go. And people all around the area got the warning because I put it out on YouTube a day before. And I was very adamant about getting it out. And the spot, I didn't just warn Italy. I warned central Italy, northeast of Rome. So, central Italy, northeast of Rome, was the spot to get the 7.4. And I'm not bragging. I have to tell you, you can rely at least as much on the region. If I'm warning the region, you can rely that that region is going to be hit. Enough so that you won't feel embarrassed to tell your friends, family, loved ones, coworkers, professionals, professors, teachers, students to check it out and to watch the progression themselves. And we've taken detailed time to put out this roadmap for which way the pressure transfers around the planet. And it's reliable as well. It took me 7 years to get down the areas. It's serious, guys. So, anyways, that being said, don't take it too serious that you should have a plan. Okay? So, in other words, I don't want you to go overboard. You don't need to have stockpiles of food and water and big guns. You need to be able to that's great for like surviving civil unrest or a nuclear war or something. But if you're going to be diving underneath a desk, you're not going to be grabbing your gun. You are going to be trying to get underneath your desk to dodge something that's falling from above. And you want to have something that's sturdy enough to support the weight of drywall falling and of plasma TV falling over on top or those kind of things.
And while you're under your desk, while you're under your sturdy object, watching these things fall, you are listening for the audio cues of what could happen if you hear creaking in your house and it sounds like it might be starting to collapse. You'll know it. And that's where you make your decision. Should you exit the structure, or do you want to try and wait it out to see if you're going to, if it's going to stop? So those are the plans you need to prepare for. The secondary stuff is shutting off the gas in your house if you have gas, making sure ignition sources are away. So if you have a fireplace or if you have flammable liquids that are out, make sure those are stowed away properly so they're not sloshing around and falling out on the floor. I know a lot of people keep cooking oil for the stove by the stove and they keep it in glass jars. Well, that's not a good idea. That'll break and that could fall out and you've got a pilot light in your dang stove, and next thing you know, you've got a grease fire going on when an earthquake's happening. I think about a lot of things like that. I'm a detailed person. I worry about things. Ask my wife. Not a hypochondriac, but dang it, I think about these scenarios, and I wonder what would happen for us. So you need to wonder what will happen for you. It's okay to wonder. It's okay to walk around your house and look at things and say, you know what, is that secure? That's okay. No one's going to make you feel weird for it. You're going to do it in your own house. No one will even know you're doing it. So just take a look around your house. Take a look at where you live. If you live on these progression lines, watch, okay? So, much love, everybody. Yeah, not too serious or anything. Much love. Seriously, though. For real, guys, have a good evening, morning, afternoon, or night, Truman Show style. And I will be, get your Makoko. And I'll be back around in a little while, and I'm going to be watching close. As soon as the big one hits, I'll be on making the report. That's all I got for you. Cheers. Have a good one. Peace out.